Then,
Yes. Hi everyone, welcome to The Big Thought. I'm here with Gavin Lacine and myself, Winston Williams, and we will be interviewing Lisa Hanley today. Lisa Hanley is a freelance journalist and producer. She has a podcast called The Scrutiny Hour. So if you haven't heard that, check that out straight after this. Lisa is going to tell us about what she's doing. Lisa, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm very grateful. And yeah, I'm far away with the questions.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with tell us about yourself. Tell us what you do. We spoke recently. We met on a group where you presented yourself as a freelance journalist. So tell us about what you do.
So I'm a freelance journalist and producer and I'm based in London. I've just actually finished my master's in TV journalism in July. And when I was coming to the end of that, I actually got commissioned to do a documentary, which was great. So I'm working on that as well as developing this podcast as well. The reason why I kind of ended up doing this is because of it, like a long story, which probably you won't have time for. But I've always wanted to do journalism. I've always been a journalist deep down, but I just didn't ever have the confidence to do it because I didn't think I was smart enough. Confidence issues. But yeah, and when I finally did it, it was like second nature. I think that I really enjoy speaking to people and finding out people's stories and the whys of everything. I'm super nosy, super inquisitive. So naturally, this is definitely the industry for me. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And it's fun.
Okay. Tell us about your journey. How did you get to where you are now, to becoming freelance?
Well, I went through a lot of industries to get here. I didn't just jump into journalism. I was first a hairdresser. So that's how I started working. I started working at like 13. And when my friends' mums found out that I was doing hair, they started hiring me. So I started going to their houses after school in my school uniform. No money or anything, but they were paying me to just turn up there and they were feeding me and everything. So I was like, oh, this is amazing, you know. So I started kind of building a business from there just by chance. And then I ended up going to study hair and makeup and then getting into that industry just authentically. And because a lot of my family members are in the hairdressing and beauty world, I ended up kind of going towards that side of it, but I was still writing. I was still kind of very engraved into books because I'm somewhat of a bookworm. I love reading, and I was writing and stuff, and I wanted to work for magazines, and I ended up interning at a lot of fashion magazines. And when I found out how fashion magazines treat interns, I was done. I was so done. I was stuck in a fashion cupboard. I wasn't writing anything. I was sorting out clothes for shoots, and I didn't enjoy it at all. And I really wanted to kind of be writing and be finding out stories and speaking to people. And when I finally got a chance to do that, it was for a wedding magazine, and I got to interview makeup artists and hairdressers and stuff like that. And what was quite funny is that because I was a hair and makeup artist, when I was interviewing them, it felt like I wasn't learning anything, and it just felt like I went full circle. So I was like, I just need to get out of this, and I applied for a lot of reporter roles. I applied for a lot of jobs in like, you know, the establishments like ITV, BBC, whatever, and I wasn't getting through. So then I ended up going through a back door and getting into events. And then I worked in fintech, which is financial technology. I did tell Winston this the other day.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah, you were like, what's fintech? I was like that when I started working there. I didn't know what it was. But yeah, I ended up working there, and I ended up working alongside a financial reporter, and I found her job absolutely fascinating. She could go all over the world. She was interviewing bankers, and my job was to invite the bankers to the conferences, be speaking to them on that level. And I applied for a reporter role in that company, and I didn't get it. I was so disheartened. And then I ended up going into a different role, being a producer for conferences, for like really large scale conferences for like the governance industry.
With that story you just told, is there anything in that particular part of the journey that you would consider like a huge challenge? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, kind of changing career. Always, people always told me that I should get into fashion, I should get into hair, and it was always people projecting their ambitions for me onto me, and it was like I had to fight to figure out what I wanted to do for myself. And I always knew that the industries that I was in weren't the right industries for me, but I was making people proud. I was making people like, I was making my mum proud, my family proud. I was like, oh, let's stay in this. But, you know, at some point I had to make decisions for myself. And I think the way I was always raised as an individual rather than somebody that is doing, like a collective. I'm an only child. I don't know if there's any of the rest of you only children.
I know, I've got
no.
brothers.
Oh, well, being an only child is the best thing ever because you literally you get a really good sense of self very early, especially if you have a parent that's strong enough to be able to let you go early so you can figure things out. And my mum was really adamant on creating an independent person rather than creating someone that was dependent on her or someone else. So I literally figured out a lot of things for myself. And yeah, I tried a lot of things before I got into the industry that I'm in. And with trying things, you have a lot of failures and it can be a knock to your confidence. But it was about kind of getting myself up and constantly having that perseverance and telling myself that I'm worthy to be in this industry. So yeah, there was a lot of challenges. It was not easy sailing at all.
So looking at so looking at your failures and the things that you do, how do you view them now, having been through a number of failures? Do you view them as opportunities for you to better yourself, an opportunity for you to learn, or an experience, or does it still have that same damning effect that it did when you first sort of came across your first few as a professional?
Yeah, I think that failures are good. The more that you fall down is the more you will persistently get up, and before you know it, you won't fall anymore. I think most of the time when you've got a cushion to fall on, you kind of go through life just easy. Like you don't ever strive for anything because you always think that you have. And I was always fearful of not having anything because I've been in the point where I've not had anything. And that was not a result of anybody around me. That was a result of myself. I put myself in that position before.
Yeah.
So I knew what that felt like, and I didn't want to put that on myself again. So everything that I've done and every failure that I've had, it's been of my own doing. And I was able to jump back up and be able to, get myself back up. And it's like, it's a bit of pride to know that you are able to get yourself out of a hard situation and you've done it yourself without asking anyone for help. For me, that was what I found, great about it.
Yeah, it's very empowering, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I was thinking about, you've used the words persistence and perseverance and the story that you describe and your upbringing, and I'm hearing like a northern accent as well. So I'm guessing has that been part of your attitude towards things? And do you find that helps you with journalism? Because I can imagine you need to really, in some cases, you'll need to be persistent with your questioning and to get to the answers you want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, so Manchester is completely different from London in so many ways. It's where I came from. It's more of a communal kind of atmosphere, whereas here it's very individualistic, you know. So when I grew up, I went to high school with the same friends that I went to primary school with, and we all kind of grew up together. We all went into complete different avenues, but you know, you have your friends that go this way and you have your friends that go that way. And, you know, I've learned from so many different people. And I would say that every person that came into my life was a lesson, and taught me something and built my character in some kind of way where they've challenged me. I've been bullied before. It's not the best thing. And things like that kind of build, you know, a backbone in you. And in journalism, you really, it's so competitive. I did not know how competitive it was until I got into this industry. They make it out like there's only this amount of space for this amount of people. So therefore, it's like, you know, you're either gonna, you know, make it, or you're not. You're just gonna be forgotten, you know. And that's how they teach you as well. You know, they teach you in that way as well. It's, you know, they offer a lot of the time the lecturers will send out job roles to about 60 odd people where it's like for one slot, and you're thinking, gosh, you know, what kind of you know, you're not really building any kind of community within these classes. You make everybody compete against each other because they're trying to get this one spot. So if I never grew up the way I did, and I did go into, I was in athletics as well. I was playing football. I was a runner, so I know competition.
Yeah.
So if I never grew up like that, then I wouldn't be able to be in this industry. I think that kind of endurance of, you know, being in a competitive environment for long periods of time is really good for this particular field. So yeah.
Is there anyone who's influenced you, not only to go into journalism, but just that characteristic you described that you have, that persistence? Anyone who inspires in you to have that?
Trevor McDonald was always, I don't know if you know Trevor McDonald.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. He was like the granddad of everybody I knew. Like, you know, he was Caribbean, old, great, and he's been on television for years and years and years. And like every time he would come on, my whole house would go quiet because, you know, Trevor's on. Everyone's listening to Trevor. And it was like, you know, the way that he's, you know, his presence, the fact that he was one of the only ones that was the same color as me that I saw on television at the time. You know, it was someone like him that I saw that made me feel like I could do it. And then I also watched a lady called Zainab Badawi. She is a Sudanese British TV and radio journalist, and she did BBC Hard Talk, and it's very hard to get, you know, Black journalists on BBC Hard Talk. And she was like interviewing like war criminals, you know, presidents of countries. She has got a series on BBC at the moment where she's talking about, you know, a different side of African history. I like the way that she's trying to change the perception of, you know, African history to, and kind of bringing that into British society and putting it on British television. So, you know, there is a lot of influences that I have had, but there's not been any influences that have been my age that I've been able to look at. It's like, you know, they're young like me, but they're talking about things that I want to talk about. I still haven't found that. I'm waiting to find that. I'm hoping that will happen.
Be that. Maybe you can be that.
Yeah, you can be that person. If it's not there, it's an opportunity for you to create it. That's the way I see things. You know, and going back to how you were educated, and I just feel it's very unfair that the education system placed all these limiting beliefs on you, having this much work and then telling you there's only this many people that can actually do the work, which is complete lunacy. It's false. You can get out and you can approach them and you can do it yourself and create your own channel, but they make you feel like you can't. And this is what's really bad about a lot of what's going on in the education in our society, I feel anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if I didn't start my business when I was younger, I wouldn't be okay doing this now, because
Mm,
it would feel nonsensical, you know.
mm.
And a lot of the time in the education system, especially in schooling, they don't teach you to work for yourself. They teach you how to be an employee. And I
Yes.
think that
Yeah.
there's something that needs to be changed there, you know.
Yeah.
After school, I was being picked up by people that wanted their hair done. You know,
Yeah.
everyone around me was like, didn't understand why I was going to this person's house at whatever time, but I was building a level of entrepreneurism,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my mum just kind of let me do that. Let me do that. And she didn't ever step in and be like, you know, um, what the hell? Why are you coming in at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're like 14 from another woman's house doing her hair? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
she never stopped me.
Yeah.
But she just, it was like, you know, learning as I go, just kind of how these things can influence, you know, me
Mm.
years later in doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Yeah, because it reminds me of a story, because I was reading about this real estate agent coming from America, because there's two different systems from here in the UK and in America. And what happened was, he was telling about the different that the Americans work more on commission. So what happens was the UK guy sold something like £2 million worth of property, and he earned about 200 grand from that. And you know, that's very good salary, obviously. But then the same guy in America, he told him that the same guy in America did the same thing and earned 600 grand. And he was like, oh wow, that sounds amazing. And then the guy said, yeah, well, would you take that job? And he goes, yeah, but what's the basic first? And it's just like,
Yeah.
that's the mentality, you know.
Yeah.
The lack of self-belief of your abilities to be able to go out and do that. Everybody, it seems like in Europe, just has this sort of safety, risk averse sort of mentality to always work for someone. That it's always about who you associate, your self-worth is associated with what company you work for, as opposed to you doing what you are doing, you know. And it's I find that quite, you know, it's quite sad in a way, you know. And
Holds people back.
and people use that as leverage, as a superiority thing to sort of put over you. And it's not, and it's really damning. It's not really nice, because your ability is not judged based on somebody else's thing. It's what you produce, and if you can produce the goods, you can produce the goods.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. It takes a long time to get there, though, especially
Mm.
when you are growing up around people that are very, you know, safety in a job, safety
Yeah.
in working for a company. You
Mhm.
know, it's very hard to be able to be like, well, I can do it myself,
Yeah.
you know, and people are just looking at you weird, like, okay, you know, most entrepreneurs, you know, go bust in this amount of years, and most restaurants fail in this amount of years. And, you know, there's all these kind of, you know, myths that
Yeah.
are playing into society all the time that are making you feel like you are not worthy. And it takes a lot of mental strength to be able to fight against that.
Yeah.
I think Gavin and I spoke about this in another interview. Actually, is that where the system is building you up to not fail. Like you're not allowed to fail. If you fail, it's like the worst thing that can happen. Whereas in life, failure is actually what allows you to eventually get to success. So you learn by your mistakes along the way, right?
Yeah. Through failing, you evolve. You know, you experience what you're not and what you don't want to be, so that you can work towards what you want to be. And without that, you don't know. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult. And I find, like, because I was born in America, I've got a lot of family and friends out there. The mentality is totally different. You know, everyone's rewarded for being an entrepreneur, and everyone's like, yeah, go get it when you're out in the States. But over here, it's like, can't you just get a job? You're just wasting your time. I mean, what's the point? Are you too lazy or whatever? You know, and it's just really frowned upon. And, you know, but then when you do become a success, everyone wants to shake your hand.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know.
Yeah. And it's so weird to me, because I just think to myself, well, how do you think everybody else has done it? You know, like it wasn't clean sailing.
Exactly. That company that you're working for started off with someone like you. They decided, I want to run my own thing, and that over the years it happened through their hard work and consistency and determination, that type of stuff. And they completely have a disconnect. They just don't see where that came from.
I think just accepting that you're going to make mistakes along the way. I know, like, a pretty large company in Denmark. I've been involved in the beginning, and one of the things I've seen what they do that I really love about their company is that they just make decisions, and if it's a mistake, they fix it along the way. And I think that's what allowed them to, I think they've grown, they've become a huge company within about 10 years, compared to if they'd really carefully done everything, they wouldn't be anywhere near where they are now. So it's that's allowing yourself to make mistakes.
Yes, yes. And there is a bit of privilege in being able to make mistakes, because, you know, some people can't actually afford to make mistakes because they've got too many dependents.
Yeah, dependents. Yeah.
And, you know, I've also got to bear that in mind, that it's not very easy for people to kind of just go out and take risks when they've got people to look after. So yeah, I'm lucky that I don't have that, so I can, you know, fall over as many times as possible, but not everybody has that.
That's definitely a really important point. I'm sure you guys do too, but I follow like a lot of self-help gurus and people who are giving advice about how to develop yourself and working in mental health. That's one of the things that I feel it sometimes. I love the advice, I love the motivation, but it's that knowing there's some people who can't actually do that for one reason or another, whether it's because of their responsibilities or just they're unable to cognitively or physically. Or I think there's sometimes something that's missed when we get this motivation from all these, you know, Tony Robbins, and there's a military guy I really like in the States at the moment, and really like his message, but some of it is just not possible for some people, right?
Yeah, it isn't. I mean, like, my dad had a mental illness and he's passed away now, but he had paranoid schizophrenia, and when I was 15, I was his carer. I was looking after him, and I will never forget just kind of how hard he found it to deal with the mental health services in the UK, and how much he didn't have trust in the psychologists and stuff like that here. And because he had bad experiences with them, it was almost like, you know, he was in this small, isolated bubble. And because the people that were supposed to help him, he couldn't trust, it was like he didn't see any way out of it, you know? And it was torture to be able to kind of watch him in this predicament and see that he was getting sick, and, you know, kind of watch him constantly fall down, come back up, fall down, come back up. But he always did come back up, but he would always fall down, you know. And he was learning about his illness. He was learning about, you know, what he was going through all on his own. You know, he didn't have that help. So most of the decisions he's made in life is decisions that he's made out of, you know, the fact that he's, you know, been messed over by the services here and the people that are supposed to help him, and the fact that he's got this illness and he didn't really know how to deal with it. So I always bear people like him in mind, because when I was going through what I was going through, I always thought to myself, gosh, you know, I wish that there was more people helping him, and I wish that more people could be able to see, you know, their way of help isn't helping, you know. So yeah, I think that's why I really advocate for mental health, because I think people that are suffering, they don't have the access to services here, because services are very underfunded, and police officers are dealing with mental health patients all the time, and they shouldn't be. And I just think that there is a bit of an issue here with mental health, especially it's in the UK. There's an issue. There is a huge issue, and I don't know how to solve it, but I know that it does need to be solved. It really does.
Kind of, it's a really good segue to your interview with Professor is it Anand Menon?
Anand Menon.
Anand Menon.
Yeah.
I actually wrote my bachelor on the differences between men and women, and part of that was within the mental health service. So I did a bit of research in the UK, and so tell me about your experience with, because what I found is that men with mental health services in the UK and in generally in the Western world, it's kind of because mental health tends to be designed for women in a way. So a lot of men come into certain places, and you know, the walls might be pink, or there'll be women's magazines on the table. And what is your experience with your father there?
My dad's experience with mental health was an interesting one, because he also had diabetes. So when he wouldn't take his mental health medication, he would forget to take his diabetes, his insulin, and one would affect the other. So it was always kind of, when I was around him, I was monitoring to see if he was taking either. And paranoid schizophrenia is a funny one because it's one of those illnesses where it's slightly like bipolar. So you're up and down, but you're also paranoid that people are out to get you. And it doesn't help when the mental health services send police officers to bang down your door when you're not turning up to appointments. Now, if that is a result of people not coming to appointments, there's something wrong.
Yeah, sounds crazy.
It's disgusting. And he was so scared of, that happening again because it was so traumatic for him. He just didn't go to psychologists. So, that trust broke down, his, accessibility to be able to get to those people and get the help that he needed. And I just think it was just unfair the way that they dealt with him. I also know that in the UK that, black men are most likely to get sectioned than white men. And my dad was sectioned a lot. So I don't know if that was a part of it. What I do know is that the way that he was dealt with, I thought that was quite heavy-handed. He wasn't a danger to other people. He was more of a danger to himself because, if he was not taking his medication, he would have a hyper. When you have diabetes, you have a hyper when
glycemic.
Yeah. So you start to kind of like hallucinate and stuff like that, and it's like stages before you like actually pass out. So that, when you've got mental health issues, is a scary situation to be in. So yeah, it was one thing that was playing into another, and it was very hard to be able to tell him to get the help when the help will result in something bad.
So,
yeah.
It just sounds like a massive communication problem as well. Like they just didn't know how to communicate, and the sort of elements that are needed to make the other person feel safe and comfortable and be able to relay what they're feeling. They were just coming in, as he said, very heavy-handed, very belligerent sort of approach, and just completely making the other person completely shut down. And then they perceive that as them being difficult, and then it just ends up escalating, and then it just turns into a massive problem.
Yeah, I've spoken to many police officers, and they've spoken about how they've been called out for people that have got mental health issues, and they shouldn't be the ones that are having to deal with people with mental health issues. And I completely agree, because you're dealing with somebody that's already imprisoned in their mind and throwing them into a cell. It's like, it's not really a way to deal with someone like that. So I think there is a funding problem that it may need a bit of looking at.
One of my experiences here in Denmark, because I think it's the same problem in a lot of places, is the training. And the police here, they train basically the equivalent of, I think it's 3 or 4 years they train before they're police officers. So I was kind of quite amazed that it's only a few months in the US. And I'm wondering if it is a situation in the UK where people are coming out, police are coming out, maybe they need more training for that kind of thing. And going back to your interview with on your podcast, and also previous conversation you and I have had, where do you think there needs to be some improvements in terms of the way that they're approaching men, the way they're approaching minorities, and institutional racism? We had a little discussion about that.
What is in police, or
as in the way the system is approaching people of color?
I think that, firstly, I've got a really weird, I might have a really odd understanding of it, but for me, I think racism is a mental health issue. I think if you think that you are better than somebody because of the color of your skin, and then you are aggressive, or you are you want to hurt that person because of the color of their skin, that's a mental health issue. It's also a mental health issue to be on the opposing end of that and have to deal with that level of oppression over and over again, and have to suppress it because it's become so normalized. Like, so on both ends, there's an issue mentally. I think that is what the core problem is. And I think that's why most things happen the way they do. You know, even down to, you know, the jobs that people take, the education people take, you know, the fact that some people get into crime and some people don't. It can be down to you feeling less than, you being made to feel like you are a thug, or you are going to get into drugs, so you get into it because what else, you know, what else is the result? They already think I'm going to do that, you know, or you kind of armoring yourself with education, high jobs, high powered, you know, this and that, and just because you felt so less than from that one experience that you don't ever want to go back to that again. So I think that there is a level of, you know, mental health implications, and I do think racism is a public health issue. In the US, they have actually progressed to a term called racial trauma, and racial trauma is just like PTSD, but like from when you've kind of suffered like an incident within for racism or discrimination, and if anything triggers that issue, then you are going to react like the first time that happened to you. I think it's the same thing here, but people don't know that they're dealing with it. They don't know that that has made them feel the way that they have, or, you know, even to the fact of people might not even go to certain positions because they feel that that's not for something of a person of color, or that's not something for a white person to be doing. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's changing the way that people think about themselves, changing the people's level of self-worth. You know, I think it's impacted people in a heck of a lot of ways, and especially in the UK, because we're still at the point where we're conversating about what's racist and what isn't. And it's like, we need to go beyond that, you know, like we already know what racism is. Why are you arguing with me about why it isn't, instead of us talking about how we can solve it, you know? I think a lot of people just need some mental healing, and to be retaught what they have been taught, you know, because education doesn't just finish at school, it's beyond that. And in my school, I remember I was taught, I was sat there reading a book. Have you ever heard of Mice and Men?
Yeah.
That book has the N-word in it over 200 times. I remember sitting in a classroom in my favorite class, which was English, and having, you know, my teacher read that to the class, to the point I had to put my hand up and read it because I was too embarrassed to have this man read that word over and over again to my class, you know? Yeah. And it's like, yes, there does need to be some educational reform, but then outside, there is also, you know, levels of microaggressions in the media, you know, kind of how, look at Meghan and Kate Middleton, if I'm going to be really, you know, you know, the way that you kind of, you know, treat certain groups in the media, the way that you are always kind of depicting films of Black people as slaves and saying that that is Black history, but, you know, there is way more history than just that. You know, there just needs to be a whole like reform and you know, jumbling up of everything, you know.
It seems like people need to differentiate between labels and identity, because this is what it seems like. People are blurring those lines, and a lot of, say, the discrimination and the things are just labels that people are putting on them, but it's nothing to do with your actual identity. And just because we are of a similar skin color, but you don't speak for me, I don't speak for you, I'm still my own person, and I have my own views within that thing. And I think a lot of it's just they're trying to do a one size fits all sort of thing all the time. And a lot of the time, just like, you know, when our very first podcast with the Black Lives Matter thing, you know, Winston and I were both from the Caribbean, we're both identify as Black men and all the rest of it. We've had completely different experiences within racism. I've never really experienced any in my life, to be honest with you. And a lot of it has come from my own community, if I am to be completely honest, with the whole light skin, dark skin, you know, sort of conflict that we all are aware of. And that's been my experience. Was Winston's had, you know, more of the sort of commercial sort of ordinary police brutality-ish sort of stuff, and, you know, the more the stereotypical stuff. So, you know, you've got to account for everybody's sort of individual experiences as well.
Yeah, You do.
And Lisa, when you mentioned about it's a mental health issue, I've never looked at it like that before. But because of that, it opens the door for a way of treating the situation. Like, you know, just relearning, as you mentioned, relearning the way, you know, maybe even like just allowing, instead of having to put people in boxes, having the opportunity to be more open and more free and more able to be in that ambiguity of people come from. And I give the example of, and I know a lot of people get offended by this. I used to, I don't anymore. But it was a question about, you know, where do you come from? And I would always say the UK. And it took me a long time to realize, you know, that, because I would get really offended that, yeah, but where do you really come from? And the question, you know, they want to know your ancestry, and it's kind of, but is that my identity? Is it where my great grandparents come from? That is my identity. And it's kind of, you know, if we can teach people and help people to have that, that it's okay to not be able to put people in boxes. That could be part of the re-education.
Yeah. Look at how long the list, when you're applying for a job, look how long the list is now. You can be black this, black that, black this, black that. And I'm like, isn't there just one type of black? Like, I thought we're just all black British, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but it's like kind of putting people into all these different groups and then, you know, putting them into BAME, you know? And then it's like, all these are over there, and then all the rest of yous, you know, are here. And, you know, it's hard to not make people feel othered when you are othering them, you know. I think that it needs to be, there needs to be something solved. Even Professor Anand said that he was stopped and searched. He said that during my interview. And this is a professor of European politics, and he's highly respected. So it happens to all of us. And yes, there is colorism within our own community, which doesn't help us either. But I think that comes from us being taught about white versus black, and then it's light skin versus, you know what I mean? So it's the domino effect.
Because I was thinking about this the other day. It's just like, no other sort of race really has the diversity really that the black community has, because within the black there's so many different shades and cultures within that, whereas white is kind of white, and yes, they have different cultures, but there's from the appearance wise they look the same, you know, in that sort of skin color and the rest of it, whereas black people is complete different range, and that opens up the door for that segregation and disunity and people sort of fighting against, because we are kind of naturally tribal, so we gravitate towards people that look similar to us as a sort of basic instinct. And within other communities they don't really have that, because they kind of look similar in a way, whereas within the black community, you know, you've got everything from as light as myself to as dark as, you know, some of my uncles and aunties that are very, very dark in Jamaica. So it's, you know, it's just one of these things that we have to contend with.
I wonder if that's just like a not miseducation, but a lack of education. Because, you know, in psychology, one of the things we learn is that if whatever you like, you will be able to see the differences, or whatever you are. For example, if you're a black guy, you can much more easily see the difference in black people than a white person can. You know, like, I'm sure you remember being in school in the UK, like people just saw everyone who was Chinese looking was Chinese. And it's like, you know, as you grow up, you learn there's actually loads of different countries there. It's the same in Africa, you know, we just learned Africa. Instead of like, there's how many different countries, and in each of those countries there's how many different tribes, and everyone's got their features. And, you know, as black people, meeting black people, you get to be able to see the differences. Whereas a white guy who hasn't experienced black people just sees all of us as the same, right? And, you know, like, so we end up with BAME, for example. It's like, we are different in so many different ways, and maybe we need that education more pushed out there.
Yeah, and asking questions is always great as well. I've met so many people from so many different places, especially during this degree, and they, you know, I've had friends that would openly ask me questions, and be like, you know, well, why are you darker than her, or why is she lighter than you? And, you know, it was asking different questions about why black people are different shades and different colors. But I respected it because she asked. She didn't make a generalization. And we just have to be a bit more approachable in letting people ask us these questions, because, you know, with asking us, we're educating them, they're educating us. You know, people probably look at black people and think, oh gosh, they all look the same as well. And I can imagine why they would think that. But at the same time, if we are not open to be able to having those conversations and those back and forths, then, you know, nobody will ever know, you know?
Yeah. It's about communication and really making people feel safe to be able to approach and ask these types of questions, because only through that are we really going to be educated and actually move on and evolve
Yeah.
within that, because people could ask, just like they said, why are we all such different tones? I mean, speaking from a Caribbean background, most Caribbean people are mixed from all of the different inhabitants of the island. So even you could be as dark as anything or as light as me, or even like my mum, who's from Jamaica, who's blonde, blue-eyed and white, but both her parents are dark. So that it's just a complete sort of mix and mash, and the genes just come through. And it's and I enjoy telling people this sort of thing because I find it interesting myself, how things can skip a generation, and then depending on who I choose to have a child with, it can come out completely like anything. It can come out like
I
my
mean,
mum, or it could come out looking like Winston, or whatever.
that's the great thing about being Black. You just
Yeah,
never know.
you
You
don't
never
know.
know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. Whereabouts from the Caribbean are both of you from? Just like out of curiosity.
My family from St. Elizabeth. So I haven't ever been there, but I've been told that's where all the light skinned guys come from, I guess. That's what I've been told. That's what I've been told. And then that's what I've been told. That's where all the light skinned Jamaicans are usually based. And then my dad's from Trinidad, and he's Asian. So I'm mixed with Asian and black and white, basically everything.
Interesting.
Yeah,
What
well,
about
my father's side is Jamaican. So my father moved to the UK when he was about 6, 7 years old. My mother's born in the UK, but my mother's family is Dominican. Not Dominican Republic, but Dominica, the smaller island.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
my mum is really light skinned, like even lighter than you, Gavin, like way
Oh.
lighter than, and so when my son was born, my son almost looked, really, really light skinned, and everyone was completely shocked. But it's just, again, my mother's side especially, but my family is very mixed. Like we've done ancestry and found we have Scottish blood in us, we have Chinese blood. So it's a very mixed family. When you start going way back up the family tree.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
My dad's side of the family from Jamaica, from Manchester, which is quite interesting, from Manchester. And then my mum's side of the family are from Nevis, which is quite near Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis. So small island and kind of biggish Jamaican island. And then I found out just before my gran died, which died just a month ago, that her dad was Jamaican Jewish, and he fought in the World War One, and I didn't know there was any Jamaican Jews.
That's what I think. That's where I think my mum's heritage is from, because of the light skin sort of thing. Because a lot of Jewish people are in St. Elizabeth apparently, so that's where the mix comes in. So
crazy.
Yeah.
So whenever I speak to anyone about Jamaica, they're like, so Jamaica, everyone is Rastafarian, and there's like. No, not really. Everyone's Christian, probably more Christian than they are here.
It's actually really funny, because even like I think a lot of the Jamaicans actually don't like Rastafarians, from what I've experienced.
They don't.
Really don't, because when my mum did dreads in her hair, my grandfather stopped speaking to her. Like it's really like he just didn't want one of his children to have that look.
It's because of the music.
Wow.
The music's made people think that's what Jamaica is. So, there's so much more to it.
Yeah, it's popular though. It's really popular.
Yeah. I really like that. Yeah. So going through all of those things, what kind of tools would you say that really stood out to you as you've progressed through your journey, that you've been able to fall back on as a framework to get you through the tougher times and the challenges? Things that you've noticed that you've been able to fall back on and say, okay, this is happening now, I need to do X, Y, Z to get myself back to a helpful sort of place.
I think the entrepreneurism is always good to fall back on. I know that if anything didn't work out, I could still do someone's hair, I could still work in a salon, I could still do someone's makeup. I still got those skills. And then also, like, I'm a really good researcher that I didn't realize before. So this was something that I realized when I was in university, that I was really good at finding stories that people might overlook. But I do think that is because I'm from a different background. And that's why I think diversity is really good, because I think when people come from different perspectives, they can find little, nuances and stories that you might not even pull out, So yeah, I'm good at finding stories, I guess. And I also blog, so I write, and I write a lot about my experience from moving from Manchester to London. And I found that writing that blog was very, very therapeutic for what I was going through, because it was a cultural change. And I didn't know it was a cultural change. I thought UK to UK, not going to be that bad. But it was dramatic. It was dramatic, and I wasn't ready for the things that I would face here. So I found that writing this blog, it kind of got very popular because people shared the same views, but didn't say it to each other because they all lived here. And I was kind of like an outsider looking in, being able to be like, okay, that isn't right. That's weird. Why am I this close to somebody, but I'm not able to talk to them? Why do we walk on this side of the escalator and not that side of the escalator? Where are all these rules coming from? It was just like, the place is so bizarre to me, and still I'm learning about it.
What's the most bizarre thing that you've come across?
I think it has to be the tube. Just all these rules on the tube that everybody just knows, but it's not shared. It's not written anywhere. But
Really?
It. Yeah.
Like what? Because obviously you're growing up here. It just isn't whatever. It doesn't. I don't recognize anything. It just seems normal.
Yeah, okay then. So when you go into the tube station, you must be on this side, unless you're walking up the stairs.
Yeah.
So you must be on the right. Otherwise, if you stood in the middle, people will just huff and puff behind you, or passive aggressively, excuse me, and then before you know it, there's a bunch of people that just want to get past you. So that was bizarre to me, because there's no signs that say that I have to do that. So then also on the tube, when the tube is packed, people can still get on it. And then if you're this close to somebody, how dare you ever speak to them or say hello or make a joke? Like, you can't make any eye contact with this person. So that is bizarre to me. It's also bizarre that I found that men, especially in certain stations, I don't want to stereotype, but because I'm on the Northern Line. So on a certain station, the men are really aggressive, and when they get when they get on the tube, it's very much, they have a really good way of ignoring people and ignoring the fact that someone might be stood there that needs to sit down. So they'll sit down, open their arms, do a big, with their big paper like this, and then just not pay attention to anyone else around them. I thought that was bizarre as well. So yeah, there's a lot of weird things going on in this place. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. It's a very weird place to me.
Have you tried journalism up in the north? Is there a difference between that? You haven't tried to be a journalist up in Yorkshire or Manchester?
No, I've not, because I was trained here, and it wasn't a plan to come to London and be trained. I'm kind of just seeing how it goes here. Because I've started this podcast as well, it would be good to stay in the same place, and this documentary is being produced here. So yeah, but I wouldn't have any problems with going back to the north, going back to where I came from, to do journalism.
Okay. When is the documentary out, by the way?
So it's been extended to the August the 10th. So it should be coming out the week after. They actually want to commission an article with it. So that should be extra work for me to do. So that's why it's been extended. But it should be good. I was out filming as well with them, and it has to be one of the most it was heavy. The documentary is very heavy. It's a very heavy documentary. It's close to my heart as well, because one of the case studies for the documentary, he was mishandled by the police, and his father had paranoid schizophrenia. No, the brother had paranoid schizophrenia like my dad did. So it's a very close story, and I understand the frustration there. So it's a heavy story, but it needs to be told.
Okay.
Okay, that's cool. So let's like looking back on your life as a younger person, what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself coming up, to to help them on their way, or just to sort of correct any limiting beliefs they may have had about themselves?
Um,
What advice would you give to a younger version of yourself, or just anybody really coming up?
that experience in life and all its textures is the best thing you can do. Even if somebody tells you not to do something, sometimes it's usually them projecting their own fears onto you. And if you feel like it's something that you want to do, you should do it. And if you fail at doing it, then you know you shouldn't be doing that, you know? But my mom used to say to me, who can't hear will feel.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I think
that was
every Jamaican household is that.
yeah. And that was the story of my life, you know.
Yeah,
I felt everything, and I was
yeah,
able to I still am kind of living life through kind of my own rules, not by what someone else is telling me to do. I just think that's so important, because when you get to a stage where you are so dependent on somebody else's opinion of you, you don't ever know what you want to do. You don't ever have any, direction.
yeah,
You eventually get to the point where you'll get lost.
yeah,
So make your own choices, and if somebody tells you that you can't do something, don't believe them until you try to do it, and you've actually not been able to do it. You know.
yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah, it is great, because through that journey you may discover that you might like something else, and it will open up another door. Just like your experiences, I guess you've sort of gone from one thing to the next, and you've just sort of discovered so many things that you've been passionate about, and you've ended up in this place now where you're able to do all of the things that you really love.
Yeah. It's so hard to kind of do that. One, if you've got dependence. Two, if you've got these mental limitations that you can't. And three, if you've got someone next to you that is telling you what you should do and what you can't do. Like I didn't mention this before, but like when I was really lost in my life, when I was like 15, one thing that my auntie gave to me was a Bible. And I'm not like a huge, I'll go to church every minute and whatever, but just kind of the guidance of being able to, pray on something, watch something come into fruition, being able to believe in something beyond myself, knowing that even if I'm alone, I'm not fully alone. That kind of stuff can help as well. Because I think people my age fear to be alone. They fear to be isolated. They fear to not have their friends around them all the time. And, you need to forget about that. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
if you can find something that makes you believe in something, that makes you feel like you're not alone, then hold on to that, and just go out and fly. Like, go out and live your life, and you'll go to where you need to go to. But don't wait for nobody.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. All those things are very, very true. It's that whole thing of finding peace within yourself before you can have peace with others, type of thing, and
Yeah.
finding that within yourself and realizing that you're never alone. If you have your faith in the various things that you're doing, and you're focused on achieving the things that you want to achieve, you will meet the people that you need to meet. Everything will gravitate towards you.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. I've actually got a vision board behind me.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, I highly
Which,
recommend those, because it just
yeah,
keeps those goals right at the forefront of your mind,
yeah,
because you can get lost in life so easily, and you end up this is why, for example, I've done all the things that I've been able to do during this pandemic, because I just got stuck on a treadmill of doing the same things over and over and over, and you don't really feel like you've got a gap to really spend a good amount of time on developing the skills that you've always wanted to. And having boards like that, and sort of saying your stuff over and over in your mind, and sort of working towards it really makes a big difference. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They kind of put themselves into a very unconscious position where they go to the pub, have a few drinks, and then you just kind of you lose yourself in
Yeah.
that. Not saying that is a bad thing. Everyone wants to do whatever they want to do, but if you're really looking to make some progress, it's very difficult when your mind isn't, you know, fully alert.
Yeah, you need to be disciplined.
Mm.
It's nothing for or against it. You need to be disciplined. You need to kind of constantly be able to say no to things that are not on
Yeah,
your path. You know, that is hard when you're young and you want to
yeah,
fit in. So you need
yeah,
to get out of that mindset of wanting to fit in. Like, I
yeah,
don't care. Most of the time, I walk around and I'm on my own, but I don't feel like I'm on my own. You know,
exactly.
it doesn't make me feel like, oh my gosh, no one's talking to me. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm
Yeah.
here to do what I want to do, and people will gravitate towards you that
Mhm.
also have that same, you know, that same like strong sense of self, and
Yeah.
you'll be able to, you know, create really long-lasting, healthy, good relationships.
Yeah, it's about creating the environment that induces the best, that allows you to be able to do the things that you want to do, and adding meaning to the various connections that you've had and that you can sort of develop as you're working towards the goals that you set yourself. And then obviously they change over time and they evolve, but you just got to be mutable and be able to sort of move around and be flexible. And that's what a lot of people I find don't really have. They get very fixed in a certain way. This has to be this has to be that, and they panic when things aren't exactly fit into that sort of mold, when actually, as they say, you know, all the success is, you know, lies outside of your comfort zone. So they need to, you know, just relax a little bit. You know, there isn't, you know, they imagine this massive sort of failure as being the end of the world, and it's just a moment.
I think just to
Just
add
a
to what you
moment.
guys are saying is that you know, if you've got a purpose, if you know where you're trying to get to, and a lot of decisions you need to make will make sense. You won't need to think too much about them. And you know, going back to these, like you said, the guys sitting in the pub not doing anything, it's because I get the idea that they maybe don't have like a much larger purpose, so they don't need to be doing anything. So they just do whatever happens to be going on that day. Whereas, you know, if you like you're doing journalism, you know exactly what kind of journalism you want to do. You know what you're trying to achieve. So really easy for you to make decisions to get there and know what you shouldn't waste your time as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. I think like my podcast, I wanted to be able to build a idea of the type of journalism that I wanted to go into. So I was setting out, this is what I want to do. Don't box me into entertainment or sports. I want to go into this. I want to be asking these questions. So hence why I started doing it myself. It might end up developing where I completely just end up doing that, and that becomes its own entity. But, you know, the mindset was I really wanted to be able to speak to these people, and this is the opportunities that they were giving me, and I don't think the opportunities that they were giving me fit with what I really wanted to do. So I made a decision to do something myself, and I'm really enjoying it. I really enjoy it. I get so much out of it. I really like it. I really do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think most people need to realize that as human beings, we need to pursue fulfillment, and not just happiness. Happiness is a moment that keeps you buzzing along. But when you're really fulfilled in the things that you're doing, it lasts. It's a meal that keeps on giving.
Much
It's
deeper
a buffet.
feeling.
It keeps you going, and you won't need all of the things that you mentioned before. All of these friends, all of these empty sort of social engagements, and all that. You feel fulfilled. Like your job and the things that you're doing just fuel you to keep going on and on and on and on, and you just keep doing stuff. And that's what I think a lot of people need to sort of work towards.
Just practically, that you know, you don't get out of bed in the morning because you're happy. You get out of bed in the morning because you've got a goal, you've got purpose, you've got, you know, even if it's just going to work, you've got a reason why you get out of bed. It's not because you're happy. Yeah, so we just stay in bed maybe.
Yeah, it's both for me. I do get happy because of what I'm doing, but then it's also feeding into this idea of me working towards something that I feel is taking me somewhere. I just don't know where that is, but I know it's taking me somewhere, you know. And I'm answering questions that are not being covered, you know. I'm looking at the news and I'm waiting for these interviews to happen.
Yeah.
And when they don't, I'm like, why? Why are we not asking these questions?
Well, the reason why is because you need to do that. That's your place. That's your place in the whole mechanism of it all. And, just saying, and it's a beautiful thing going off and having complete sort of limitless potential. And that's what's the beauty about it. You can go, you don't know where you're going to, but you're moving, and wherever it ends up is wherever it ends up, and it's a beautiful thing. Whereas a lot of people have a lot of sadness and depression because they see a limit, they see that roof, they know, okay, I can only get promoted so many times, and then that's it. And that's where a lot of unhappiness comes into it, and then they start doing crazy things to just feel alive, and that's where they get these little moments of happiness, but they're not fulfilled. And this is where the problem lies. You need to search and strive for fulfillment over little moments of happiness. And I feel like if a lot of people focused in on that more, would have less likely to have these problems, a lot of problems that we have.
So Lisa, I listened to your podcast, and now we've just spoken about these questions that people don't get to hear. If we want to hear these questions that we don't normally hear, how do we watch your podcast, and how do we hear the questions you've been asking? Like, give us your social media, and where do we go to listen to you?
So my podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. I'm on Anchor FM, I'm on Apple, I'm on Google, I'm on TuneIn now, SoundCloud, Mixcloud. Anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can find the Scrutiny Hour. I've got a Facebook page called @Lisa Journalism, and you can follow me there. And I kind of update people on what I'm doing, where to kind of go for my work. And I've got a website, www.lisajournaldn.com, where I put all of my journalism work, my TV work, my documentaries. I've done more than one documentary. So
great.
Please do look on my website.
Yeah.
You can also find the Scrutiny Hour on my website, and then my blog post about me loving and hating London. I also put my events and stuff like that on there. So I'm trying to get people to go on my website, because I wanted to do YouTube, but I don't know, I might do that on a different time, but I really want to own my stuff, have it all in one place. So yeah, please do go on my website. And also my Twitter is JLisaJournal, and my Instagram is Lisa Hanley IG.
Great.
Okay, fully covered.
Oh yeah, I've got everything going on.
Everything going. That's good. Even that alone is a full-time job. You even have all the social media.
It is a full-time job, and like when I was studying, I did fashion brand promotion with journalism. That's what I did as my first bachelor's, and I was so ashamed to tell people about it, because everyone in my TV journalism class, some people did economics and politics and stuff like that as a bachelor's. I'm like, oh, I did fashion brand promotion journalism, but you know what it did teach me? It taught me about marketing. It taught me about social media. It taught me how to build a product, how to sustain it. I mean...
Yeah, and then you're using it for yourself, and that's it.
Yeah, I didn't know that those skills that I got taught there would come into handy for what I'm doing now, because I didn't enjoy marketing, but because I'm marketing something that I like, because it's me and stuff, it's something that I needed to learn. So every little thing that you're going to learn in life is going to be a lesson that you're going to be able to put into practice at some point, but you have to be awake.
Yes.
You have to be paying attention.
100%.
All right, Lisa, I'm looking at the time. I know you had an appointment after our interview, so we're not going to keep you any longer.
Yeah.
This was really cool.
Really nice speaking.
Yeah, it was really nice meeting you. And
I really enjoyed it. Thank you,
really
and
nice.
Keep doing what you're doing. This is a really great platform, and I really, really love that you're doing this. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. And again, everyone, the links for Lisa and her social media are below. So definitely listen to that podcast. It was really interesting interview I had, the latest one. And we'll see you guys soon. This was The Big Thought with Gavin, Winston, and Lisa.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.